Now, we finished up on James last week, James chapter 5, and a number of you commented on one particular thing we looked at out of James last week, and that was about confession, forgiveness and healing. And quite a few have said that was really a light bulb moment for you, and it's really been a breakthrough. And I raised the question, well, really, is there forgiveness without confession? And that's a theological debate, and we're not going there today, but I want to minister to that, maybe in a way that you don't expect. So I want you to come on a journey with me, and see where we go. We're looking at the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in John chapter 11, and it's right through to verse 44. So you can follow if you like. We're going to pick some verses out and put on the screen, but otherwise I'll be telling the story as we go. So we have two sisters and a brother, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. They were very close to Jesus. Jesus obviously must have been in their household very often, and close association there. And we know that the story when Jesus first came to their place, that Mary sat at the feet of Jesus and listened, and Martha got upset because she's out there cooking and preparing, and she came and told Jesus, "Come on, tell my sister to come and help." So Martha, Martha, you're worried and upset by many things. Mary has chosen the better, to sit at my feet and listen. So that's the beginning of the relationship, and obviously it went on from there. And we come to a point where Lazarus became sick. He lay in bed sick, so the sister sent word to Jesus, the one you love, Lazarus, whom you love, he's sick. In other words, you need to come quick. And Jesus got the word, and we know the story that says that Jesus actually stayed where he was 2 more days. He was quite a journey from where Lazarus was. And he said to his disciples, well, actually, this will not end in death. It'll be to my Father's glory. And so he just stayed where he was. The disciples said, okay, we'll stay with him. But in the meantime, we know that Lazarus dies. And Jesus said to his disciples, Lazarus has fallen asleep. Let's go and wake him up. So disciples said, what? If he's sleeping? Isn't that good? Why go and wake him up? And he says to them plainly, he's dead, people. He's died. I'm going to go and wake him up. And he said right from the start, this sickness will not end in death. That's a word we need to hang on to. This sickness will not end in death. It is sickness, yes. And whatever the circumstances come, it will not end in death. But he says to his disciples, he's died. Isn't that contradictory? Huh? He just said, this sickness will not end in death. 2 days later, he said, he's dead now. How much of God's word is confusing to us? God promises one thing and God says certain things about us, but reality tells us different. The circumstances would confuse us as to what God actually means and what he said. But he said, well, let's go. We're going to go and wake him up. So they said, all right, let's go back to Judea and die with him. If he's going to die, we might as well die. That's Jesus. They knew that he was under persecution. So they turn up, and the word gets around that Jesus is in town, and Mary and Martha hears that he's in town. So Martha gets up and runs out to meet Jesus before he even comes into town and meets him. Mary stays at home. She's too upset. And Martha gets to Jesus, and this is the comment she makes in verse 21. Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Wow, that's laying it down, isn't it? Jesus, if you had been here, you're late. You didn't show up. Where were you, Jesus? Now my brother is dead. And if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Jesus, I got a bone to pick with you. And so she lays it fair and square at the feet of Jesus. If you had been here, he would not have died. And you know how much in our life, in our Christian walk, do we actually blame God for stuff that happens? Hello? We blame him for not showing up. We blame him for not answering our prayers. We blame him for not doing what we expect that he should have done. God, if you had turned up when I asked, things would be different right now. Yeah? You might not have said that out loud, but I'll tell you, it bubbles deep down inside, doesn't it? God, if you had fulfilled my dream, I'd be in a different place. God, if you had answered my prayer, this wouldn't have happened. God, why did you allow that person to do that to me? God, why did you allow this to happen? God, if you had intervened, I wouldn't be sick right now. And all these things we get bubbling up inside, we want to blame God for. And Martha's no different. Mary was no different. We know that she comes later and says the same thing. Jesus, if you had been here, we wouldn't be in this situation. Mary was too hurt. Now, she was grieving, obviously, because her brother had died, and all the Jews had come out from Jerusalem to be with them, to help them through the grieving process. But something more is happening in Mary. More than grieving. She's hurt, she's disappointed. Maybe resentment towards Jesus for not coming. They knew he was only 2 days' travel away. He could have got there on time. Now, it's interesting how Jesus responds to Martha. Beautiful response. Verse 23 said to Martha, your brother will rise again. And I expect he said it in a very soft, gracious voice. Martha, your brother will rise again. She's just leveled a fair accusation at him for not turning up on time, for not being there. The death of my brother's on you, Jesus. He just responds, he will rise again. Wow, what a word. What a word to be spoken into your life. You will rise again. You will rise again. This is not going to hold you down. You will rise again. Your brother will rise again. Then he goes on and says, she has a bit of a conversation. Well, I know he's going to rise in the last day. She kind of deflects. I know he's going to rise when you come back in the last day. But Jesus said to her, I am, this is verse 25, 26, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though he die. Whoever lives believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Now, we read that often at funerals, don't we? Dave, how many times do you hear that at funerals? Yeah. And often we write this off as a funeral verse. This is for funerals. This is for when people die. And it is. But let's have a look at the promise here. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live even though they die. There's a contradiction. They will live even though they die. Now, we've got to remember, Jesus is not giving this in terms of a funeral service. He's giving this in terms of a person who's just died. Yes, they haven't had the funeral yet. Maybe they've still got to go through all that, or they're grieving and so on. But he said, okay, even though he dies, he's still going to live. Martha, I told you he's going to rise again. He will rise. Do you believe this? And whatever comes your way, there's a word that is for you. God has spoken it to you. It could be a personal word. It could be a word from his promise. It could be a word that you've heard somebody preach or something. There's a word that's had life in it. There's a word that you know God was speaking to you about. It's your word. And Martha's word is Jesus saying, he will rise. That's his word. He will rise. And there's a word for you, even though the circumstances don't line up, even though the reality of it is completely contrary, Jesus said, do you believe? He asked Martha straight up, do you believe? Do you believe he's going to rise? Do you believe? Come on, Martha, do you believe? He knew full well he was in the tomb. He knew full well that he was dead. He knew all of that. Do you believe, Martha? So Mary comes out to Jesus at that point, and she says the same at Jesus, if you had been here. Jesus didn't want to argue the point with them. He said, okay, where have you laid him? I want to go to where he is. So they took him to the tomb. Took him outside the town where the tomb was. The stone was over the tomb. If we go to verse 39, this is where things really begin to change. Said to Mary, Martha, and whoever the able-bodied men were there, take away the stone. But Jesus, he's been there for 4 days. There's going to be a smell. But Jesus, that's not cool. That is not cool to open the tomb on somebody who's been there for 4 days. That is not cool. That is Martha's response. That is what she said. Jesus, come on, that's not. But Lord, there's a bad odour. We can't open the tomb. No, you've gone too far now. Now, what would you say in that situation? Time to run? I don't know whether you'd say anything. So Jesus has lost it right now, opening the tomb, rolling away the stone when you know he's been there for 4 days. Now, he's been in the tomb 4 days. He may have been dead longer than that. So it's not going to be good, is it? Not going to be good. Jesus' response. You know, often we think, no, this is too hard. We know the word of Jesus. We know he will rise. Jesus said he will rise. We know that. We know that Jesus will do something in our life, but sometimes it just gets too hard to deal with stuff, doesn't it? We'd rather keep it buried. Sometimes it's just better to leave sleeping dogs lie, and we just leave it there, and it simmers away in our life, and we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to go there. We just want to keep the lid on it, and we just keep God out of it. That's what Martha was trying to do at this point. Just gets too messy. Man, if I open up about this is just going to get too smelly, too messy. I don't know if I'm prepared for that. Then Jesus' response to Martha in verse 40, he said, did not I tell you that if you believe, you'd see the glory of God? Now, somewhere in the conversation, that was referred to Martha about the glory of God. Remember what Jesus said earlier? This will not end in death, but it's for God's glory. That was Jesus' word to the disciples, and that's the word that he originally responded with. So no, this will not end in death. It is to God's glory. And so somehow in all that conversation that was conveyed to Martha, and Jesus said, did not I tell you? This is for God's glory. You're going to see God's glory if you believe. Come on. You know, there's a point where believing has to be turned into action. There's a point where we've got to take action on the one that we're believing for or believing about. The one who believes in me will live even though he dies. Now we've got to get our head around that. The one who believes in me will live even though he dies. Even though reality says one thing, if you believe, there's another reality waiting for you. Even if the situation is, there's death and it seems like end of story, impossible, nothing else can be done, it's too hard to deal with it, just leave it there. If we believe, there's another reality waiting for us. And the word of Jesus said he will rise. This will not end in death. This is for God's glory. These are all the words that are coming to Martha. And there's a point where she now has to take action. Jesus said, come on, take away the stone. Yeah, that's not cool. Let's leave this one alone. Let's not go there. Let's not uncover this. Jesus, I don't want you to go into that space. You can touch everything else, but not that. It's too messy, it's too smelly, too hard for me. Jesus said, Martha, did not tell you that if you believe, you'd see the glory of God. There's a point where we have to actually take action. You know, Jesus said, take away the stone. The fella can't rise with the stone over the cave. My word cannot reach him if it's all covered over. If the stone is still there, my promises will not be fulfilled. Lazarus will never hear my voice if you keep the stone there. If you don't open up and you don't release this to me, then my promises will never be fulfilled. And there's a point where we have to open up to the Lord and let His word get in. Where we open up to the Lord about whatever issue it is, whatever's gone down, whatever's too hard for you, whatever is there that seems like end of story, not called to go there. If we open up, roll a stone away, then the word of Jesus can get in there. You know, the stone is referring actually really to a hard heart, isn't it? We've hardened our heart over the issue. We've hardened our heart to the Lord and say, Lord, I don't want you in this space. I don't want you touching that thing. It's too hard. It's not that it's too hard, we've just hardened our heart about it. It's like a rock. Jesus said, take away the stone. Take away the stone. Roll away the stone. Open it up so that I can speak into this situation. Verse 43, Jesus spoke these words. Once they rolled the stone away, Mary, Martha had to take action. They gave the command, we'll roll the stone away. If it's smelly, it's smelly. Let's see what happens here. Rolled the stone away. And Jesus' word, after he prayed, said, Lazarus, come out. Come out of there. What are you doing in there? Get out of there. Now, this is going Aussie now, you know. Bit of license there. Now, we know when they record things, they make it look a little bit more flowery, hey? And but I dare say he had other words to say too, hey? But this is just what's recorded. Lazarus, come out. And man, those words went right in there. Lazarus is dead, he's gone, he's out. But I tell you, those words somehow entered his body, entered his ears, entered into his heart, and somehow the life and the power just whoosh. Goes, whoa, what's happened? Lazarus is back. And the instruction was, Lazarus, come out, don't stay in there, come out, come on buddy, come out. I know you're a bit shy, but come out of there. And he comes out. It says Lazarus, verse 44, came out, his hands, his feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Take off the grave clothes and let him go. So life entered him. He rose again. This sickness did not end in death. Now, you think it's the end of the story, but there's never the end of the story for God. You realise that? He adds to the story. We think it's the end of the story, but say, no, there's more to come. There's another chapter to be written yet. There's another whole book to be written yet. It's not the end of the story. This will not end in death. So Lazarus came out. He's obviously struggling. He's still bound in the clothes. I don't know how he walked. Talking about zombies, I mean... This guy's coming out just wrapped, his head's face covered. He's unwrap the guy, let him go, release him. And there comes a point when we are set free that we have to begin to remove the rubbish that bound us. There comes a point where we've been set free spiritually. We know the freedom of Christ and we have the peace and we have the blessing and the grace of God in our lives. We know what it is to be loved, but there are certain things we just have to remove the rubbish and the garbage that got us there in the first place. And a lot of people want the freedom and the liberty and peace, but they're not prepared to remove the garbage. Now imagine if Lazarus went into town still wrapped in the garbage, still wrapped in the clothes. That's the real zombie movie would have started then. Everybody would have parted. I mean, they'd say, whoa, what's this guy? Dead man walking. There's a lot of Christians like that. They've been set free. They know the freedom. They're all this garbage still hanging off them. They're just still bound by stuff that put them there in the first place. And they wonder why God's not answering their prayer. Take off the clothes so he can be free. We've got to remove the grave clothes. There's a journey. It takes time to do that. It takes obedience. We've got to take action on those things. Through the obedience to the Holy Spirit, when he says drop it, you drop it. When he says get out of there, you get out of there. When he says get rid of that thing, you get rid of that thing. When he says stop doing it, you stop doing it. That's taking off the grave clothes. Because if you keep down that journey, you're going to be right back in the tomb again. You're going to be another dead person again. So I said to you, I probably wouldn't minister to this as you expected. Confession is actually opening up to the Lord. Saying to the Lord, yep, I've messed up. Yep, Lord, I've really missed it. Lord, I want you to be involved in my life. It's like rolling the stone away. It's like saying, yep, Lord, I know it could be smelly. I might even get emotional. I might even get upset. I might not even like what you do in my life. It might just irk me a little bit, but I know that you've got good. You said Lazarus would rise, so I will rise out of this. And as we're obedient, as we open up to the Lord and allow his word to come in, it's a journey. But there's a point where Jesus' word actually brings life and the dead man walks. There's a point where you know there's a turning point in that issue that, yep, God's got this, yep, Jesus has got this. And it gives you confidence to open up more and say, yep, I'm not going to hide this thing anymore. I'm not going to keep a lid on this. I'm going to open up. And if I have to, I'm going to talk to somebody. God, help me to do this. Help me to take the stone away. And that is really the point of action that we need in this whole thing of confession, this whole thing of allowing forgiveness to come into circumstances, into resentment, where we resent somebody for doing something, or we resent God for not showing up when we thought he should. All of those issues. We have to at some point actually roll the stone away and allow Jesus' word to come into us, and there'll be a point where you experience his life, you experience the power entering into you, and say, yeah, I've turned the corner. I've turned the corner on this, and I ain't going back. I'm not going back into that tomb again. Isn't God good? Amen? Now I know that, I said last week that probably there'll be half of us here who've got issues that we've covered up, and secret sin, if you like, or secret issues that we don't want anyone to know. We don't want God to go there. We've shut that door on God. Say, God, you bless me, but don't go in there. We've all done it. And I reckon there's probably half of us here still doing it, not letting God in certain issues in our life. You think it's the end of the story, but God says, no, there's more story to write here. This will not end in death. It's not the end of the story. So I believe that God really wants to minister into this situation for many of us. Now, I don't know how God will do it. I have no clue. I'm glad I'm not God. I'm not the Holy Spirit. He knows how to deal with this stuff. Chris, would you like to come up? And anybody else would like to come in the team to join in? And this word comes to us. It'll come to you today. Martha, didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you'd see the glory of God? Come on, Martha. Now's the point of action. It's up to you, Martha. Come on, Martha. Now's the time to roll a stone away. Come on, Martha. Are you going to do something about this? Or are you just going to leave the stone there? It's a point of action. Now, you might not need to do anything today, and it might not be appropriate for you to respond today, but man, you've got to start the journey to roll that stone away. And let God in. Say, God, I need you in this space. I'm disappointed. God, I feel resentment. God, I've got a lot of hurt towards you about this issue. But God, I know that you're good. I need you to come and to turn the corner for me on this. Because I don't want this thing hanging off me for the rest of my life. I want to be set free. I want to be released.